Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we will talk about the strategic significance of India's first and only tri-services command, the Andaman and Nicobar Command. The Indian Ocean, which remained quiet for some time after the Cold War, has re-emerged as a critical theatre for strategic competition. With China expanding its presence in the Indian Ocean, India has formulated a new maritime approach to retain its prominence in the region. Andaman and Nicobar Islands are strategically located near the Malacca Strait and has the potential of being a key base for projection of power in the Indian Ocean. India's first tri-services command, Andaman and Nicobar Command, was set up in 2001. Recently, India's military presence in the Indian Ocean got a boost with the commissioning of a full-fledged naval base, INS Kohassa, in North Andaman Island. Media reports also say that a 10-year roll-on plan at an estimated cost of 5,000 crore rupees is being worked out for developing military infrastructure at the Andaman and Nicobar Command. So what is the strategic significance of India's first and only tri-services command in Andaman and Nicobar, and how can it be developed further to boost India's power projection in the Indian Ocean region? For this, we have with us a distinguished panel of guests today. Let me start by introducing them to you, beginning with the Retd Vice Admiral Shekhar, the defense expert we have with us. We also have with us Abhijit Singh, the head of Maritime Policy Initiative of ORF, and we have with us Retd Major General Ravi Arora, Chief Editor of Indian Military Review and the Brigade Commander at one time in Andaman Nicobar as well. Welcome all of you gentlemen to Rajya Sabha TV studios. Let me begin with you, Admiral Sinha. And for our viewers' sake, to try and understand, we talk so much about the Indian Ocean region and its strategic importance. What exactly do we mean when we say that IOR, that's Indian Ocean region, is so strategically significant for both India as well as China?
Vishal, if you look at the map, you will find that the Andaman Nicobar Island is located just about 150 kilometers from the nearest Indonesian island, the Aceh Island. And the 10-degree channel through which majority of trade passes from the South China Sea and the Pacific into the Indian Ocean is right between the North and South Nicobar Islands. So majority of ships will pass through those areas. Number two, the big countries who import a lot of oil, they import it from the Gulf. For example, China, Japan, the South Korea, the big industrial countries. And all of it actually passes through the Malacca Strait.
So it's an important trade route.
Very important trade route. And we are not the first ones to realize this. Even during Chola Empire in the middle of early 11th century, he had a so-called naval base to send the expeditions into Indonesia.
Okay. So historically also it has been very significant.
That's right.
Abhijit, from your perspective, we've seen how both China and India have been trying to outdo each other in the IOR as well as and maintain relations with the littoral nations there. So, in that sense, Indian Ocean region becomes very, very important for India.
That is correct. There's two reasons actually why the Indian Ocean is so important. One, as Admiral Sinha has correctly mentioned, that it's a global highway. It's a highway through which passes a majority of the oil and cargo that goes from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, and also from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. But more than that, it is a theatre of strategic contestation. If you look at the sort of geopolitical games that are being played in the Indo-Pacific region, most of these games today are being actually played in the Indian Ocean region. Mm-hmm. The South China Sea is a contested theatre in the sense that there are live disputes there, and there is a virtual gridlock in which there's not too much power projection that can happen. But really speaking, the open ocean in the Indo-Pacific region is the Indian Ocean region. And so you have the Chinese that are trying to emphasize their presence in these waters. You have the US, you have France, you have other countries, Japan, and of course India, that considers this to be a veritable backyard. So for India, protecting its stakes in the Indian Ocean region, where it faces a number of traditional as well as non-traditional threats, is critical. And in this, I think the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are important, because as somebody has said, that the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are actually unsinkable aircraft carriers. They mark a buffer zone between India and those islands, and they are a strategic outpost that allow you to defend your vital stakes in the Indian Ocean region. And therefore, now I think that this move has come, in which we are building up infrastructure, defense infrastructure in the Andamans, as well as we are commissioning some of these naval bases. I think is a move in the right direction, because this underscores our stakes in this really important theatre of importance for India as well as other regional states, and it emphasizes our preeminence in this region.
Okay, General Arora, do you agree with what Abhijit is saying? And Admiral Sinha has rightly pointed out how IOR, Indian Ocean region, is a a trade-specific area, and that is why it is important. But Andaman Nicobar Islands are a very strategic outpost, and as Abhijit put it, as many others also say, it's an unsinkable aircraft carrier.
Andaman and Nicobar Islands are important because of the Indian Ocean region. And this is a region which has 1/4 of the world's population around the Indian Ocean. 1/3 of the littoral states of the world are located around the Indian Ocean region. The ocean itself is a lifeline, not only for these littoral states, but also for America, for Japan, far away from the ocean. Because of what Abhijit said, it is a global highway. Such large volume of the world's trade, and particularly energy, oil and gas, pass through the Indian Ocean, that any disruption, and disruption is possible because of the number of choke points around it, it becomes important. So all nations who have large volume of trade, maritime trade moving through the ocean, they are interested in safeguarding it. So they have started going out. There was a time when there was a unipolar world or a bipolar world when very few navies were there. Now everybody's navy is roaming around there trying to protect their assets, their trade. The Chinese, who were only a brown water navy, now want to extend right up to Africa and the Gulf. They have started establishing bases because of the critical trade, the dependency of their oil supplies, gas supplies from the Middle East through the Malacca Strait. And that's where the Andaman Nicobar Islands come in. Now, as correctly pointed out, if there is disturbance in this trade here, India will be most affected because it is in its backyard.
Okay, and that is why, the reason that Andaman Nicobar is so significant, that in 2001, the first Tri-Services Command was set up in Andaman and Nicobar as the ANC, Andaman Nicobar Command. But Admiral Sinha, one, the fact that it is led by a naval officer, that's one aspect of it. Second is, if you would point out how and why this particular, establishment of a separate Tri-Services Command in Andaman Nicobar has helped all through these years from 2001, we're now in 2019, and what else needs to be done there?
If you, as I said, if you look at the map, you will realize that the Navy alone cannot really perform all the duties which are tasked. And therefore, it was thought that all three services in one place, because you got to have a joint force kind of projection. If it is to work as an outpost, strategic outpost, you got to have a fighting force, you got to have air power, and you got to have the naval ships and submarines. So, with that thought, it was changed into a Tri-Service Command. But coming to your the next question, what needs to be done? I think as you mentioned in the beginning, that there is a talk that nearly 5,000 crores is going to be invested.
The roll-on plan.
The roll-on plan. The important thing is that you have to develop the Andaman Nicobar Command not only as a armed forces strategic outpost, but as a business model. There are ports which are coming up, and those ports will also give room to the naval forces and some more army to operate from those areas. Or let us say that your island, at some point in time, somebody sets a dirty eye on those islands, and you have to evict them. So unless you have the army, the boots on the ground, that's not possible to be done. The second thing is that when you have an expeditionary force at any time, amphibious forces, they are joint forces by all three services. Even now, amphibious warfare is not fought by one service. You require an air cover for launching the amphibious operation. You require ships to carry the troops, and require troops to fight out those people who have illegally occupied one of your islands. Now, mind you, that out of 570 odd islands, only 37 are inhabited. So there are large number of islands. You must have been reading that poaching, people illegally having pitched their tents and stay there, fishing, trawling. So these are all the peacetime tasks where I think the Army's requirement is very much there.
Okay, so for peacetime task as well, we would require the presence of all three forces. Abhijit, if you look at the Andaman and Nicobar Command, the ANC, and the time it has spent, almost 18 years now, how would you look at the kind of contribution it has made in terms of its strategic significance? Because it is located in an area which is very, very strategically important for India and then geopolitically as well.
Right. So my impression is that the Andamans has been playing an important role, but somehow we haven't leveraged these islands to its potential. The fact of the matter is that the Indian Navy has had plans to build up these islands since I think 2011. It was in the Commanders Conference, I believe, in 2011 when this thing had first come up of building up these islands into a strategic garrison. But the important thing to understand is that there has always in the Indian system been a debate about the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So there is one section of the foreign policy establishment, at least, that has argued that it might not be such a good idea to build this up into a strategic garrison, because a number of countries in the neighborhood, particularly Southeast Asian countries, perceive India to be this benign and benevolent power. And somehow, if you have this really big strategic power projection base in the Andamans, then somehow that impression would change, and it would not reflect very well on India. And I think for a long time there was a consensus in the system that this was the way to go. That you needed these islands to do a little bit of non-traditional security. You needed them to do things like Milan exercises, HADR, non-combatant evacuations, etc. Maybe a bit of surveillance, but let's not convert this into some kind of a power projection hub. I think that consensus now is beginning to shift a little bit. And
because of China?
And so there's 3 or 4 reasons why I think this has happened. One is that if you, just about a month back when the Raisina dialogue was held, there was 5 chiefs, Quad countries plus France on the stage, and they were discussing, a lot of the discussion was about China in the Indian Ocean region. And 2 or 3 things came up. One, the Chinese submarines. The fact of the matter is that the chief of the naval staff, Admiral Namba, is on record saying that these Chinese submarines that are coming into this region, we are sure that they're not doing any anti-piracy activity. So if they're not doing anti-piracy activity, they're essentially gathering vital data from this region, and they're trying to sort of develop a plan for wider operations. The second is that India emphasizes a lot on the Bay of Bengal, and China now has quite a substantial presence in the Bay of Bengal. They're building a port in Bangladesh. They have a plan to build a port in Myanmar. There's other activity that is happening. Also, a lot of these BRI projects, Belt and Road projects, aren't going too well. So the fear is that they might come in with some sweeteners of military aid and some maritime activity. So India has to emphasize its own stakes, its own preeminence in the Bay of Bengal region, and for that you need the Andamans. But thirdly, I think, and importantly, is the maritime domain awareness thing that has not come up for discussion, which was, of course, discussed there. That now that India has this fusion center in Gurgaon, and we are gathering a lot of information from a lot of the other countries. They are all part of the maritime domain awareness grid. We need to do a lot of information collection ourselves. So if you look at these recent commissionings of these bases in the Andamans, they are essentially air stations, naval air stations that have now been upgraded into bases.
The latest one being INS Kohassa.
Latest being INS Kohassa. In 2012, there was INS Baz. And the idea is to position aircraft like the P-8Is and for them to go to have some kind of an active surveillance over the region to know where the Chinese submarines are operating in this region. So if you look at the picture holistically, it becomes very clear that China is a main sort of trigger for this whole activity, but it is also about India building up its own presence in the region, because this, as the general here has said, is our backyard, and in our backyard we can't be looking to be slackening out.
Okay, General Arora, let me bring you on the aspect of how the Tri-Services Command, is functioning out there. And as Admiral Sinha has pointed out, that in areas like Andaman and Nicobar, nothing can be done without the active participation of all three forces. Since you have served there, how do you think the first Tri-Services Command has worked out for the past 18 years or so?
Allow me to put things in perspective, and it will naturally follow why things are being done now and what needs to be done. So, geographically speaking, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands is a range which is part of the Arakan-Yoma range. So, naturally it's part of Burma. But we are lucky that today Andaman and Nicobar is part of India. The British could well have made it part of Burma, but Burma got independence a little later. And historically and culturally, because of the the prison which was constructed there, because of the population at the time of independence, because of the Chola Empire in the 8th to 10th centuries, who used it as a staging post for their empire towards Malaysia, historically it has been part of India. But remember, Andaman and Nicobar has been the subject of contest between the British, the Portuguese, the Dutch and the French. These other powers, they occupied it and left it thinking it is of no use. And thereafter, the British, when they occupied it, they first went to occupy it as a naval, as a military base. They actually sent a major of the Corps of Engineers in a ship to go and establish it and create the whole infrastructure for living. But then they lost interest because the Indian Ocean at that time became what is called the British Lake.
Okay.
But now, when the Chinese have started coming out into the Indian Ocean, the whole complexion has changed. So now people have started looking at the importance of the islands. And the first thing is the distances. The islands, if you look at the map, are farther away from the Indian mainland and much closer to places in Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia. Just remember, Indira Point at the southernmost tip of the Great Nicobar Island is just 215 kilometers from Banda Aceh on the Sumatra Island. Rangoon from the northern tip is only 500 kilometers. Bangkok, as the crow flies, is 800 kilometers. Similarly, Hanoi is 1700. Whereas Kolkata, Vizag, Chennai, Colombo are all between 12 to 1500 kilometers. So this gives us a natural aircraft carrier, or much better, with 4 airfields now existing. It gives us a wonderful base. But also remember, before I come to the military importance, Andaman and Nicobar Islands give us 30% of India's EEZ, exclusive economic zone, which is 2.15 million square kilometers. If Andamans were not there with us, 30% of this economic zone would not have been with us. And then other powers would be free to come towards the Indian mainland without being checked. Of course, now it is with us. An excellent outpost needs to be developed. The second is these bases itself. When you position your assets, or rather air assets, at these islands, at these 4 airfields, the Jaguar, the Su-30, the Mirage and the Rafale can operate up to and almost covering Vietnam, Philippines, Hong Kong and parts of China. But remember, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands need to be defended also. Right now, 2 airfields. One is of Port Blair at 10,800 feet and the other is of Car Nicobar at 8,900 feet. Just 2 airfields are not enough. The other 2 are smaller at 3,000 plus feet. These have to be developed. You need 4 airfields full-fledged to take on all types of aircraft to defend themselves because they are so far away. So that is why this 5-year plan has come up. Now, second is that these locations from the naval point of view provide excellent opportunity for naval diplomacy. We have been using these islands as well as from the mainland to provide HADR, that is the humanitarian and disaster relief to the countries in the southeast. And because the Andamans are located closer to Southeast Asia, we are part of these regional groupings, which gives us tremendous leverage. And we are trying to work this leverage against China also.
So exactly the same way as Abhijit was pointing out that it is not only strategically located, but it's also strategically significant. And as General Arora is saying, Admiral Sinha, that it is also important to go ahead and defend Andaman and Nicobar, and that is why he said we have 2 airfields which are almost up to 10,000 feet, but then we need to develop more as well. That is where this 5,000 crore plan, the roll-on plan, or another parallel plan which is being talked about. So if you look at, in terms of the future plan for ANC as well as for the entire island, grouping of around 570 odd, how do you see we moving ahead and we should be planning ahead? Because this, as all of us are now agreeing upon, is a very, very important asset India has.
We have started a little bit late. I'm happy that the government has taken a very, very positive step because, they have an organization called the Island Development Authority. And regrettably, in the previous times, it didn't have very frequent meetings. But now the Island Development Authority is headed by the Honorable Home Minister, and the present Lieutenant Governor of Andaman and Nicobar is the Vice Chairman. It has to be dovetailed with the overall progress and overall development of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. As I mentioned, that the ports are coming up, the roads are being modified. There is going to be a electricity generating power plant, which there are some newspapers reporting that the Japanese have shown some interest. And there has to be some merchant shipping traffic. Only then, it can also give you jobs to people and something to protect, something very worth. And thereafter, it will be too late if you don't create the military establishment before you have put these, the economic assets there. So I think that, the point is that, it has to be economically sort of fairly independent island so that it doesn't have to depend too much on the mainland.
Okay, so you're saying that civil, military as well as economic development has to go hand in hand. Abhijit?
Yeah, I'd like to also add to what the Admiral has just mentioned, which is that the original plan actually to build up these islands wasn't so much strategic as it was commercial. So the idea, I think, in 2015, when the Modi government had first announced, I think it was a package like a 10,000 crore package to build up those islands. The emphasis was on turning this into a commercial hub. And if you would just track the developments that have happened in the recent months, there's a proposal to build a transshipment port at Campbell Bay. There is a connectivity project that is coming up. I think it's called the Udan scheme, in which there is the air traffic is going to be directed between India and Indonesia and other places. And also, I believe global investors are being invited to invest into infrastructure and also social development projects in the Andamans. Now, we have to keep in mind that the ecology of Andamans is really sensitive. And a number of senior people have pointed out that no matter how we develop these islands, we should ensure that the ecology of this place is preserved. Now, one of the reasons why we were not able to develop the Andamans in the past is also because of this ecology factor. And we have to consider this, that a lot of talk that is now happening about building up these strategic capabilities in the Andamans might be driven by the fact that because we are converting this into a commercial hub and we want a lot of economic growth to happen, we will now need to defend the island. So it might not be so much about power projection. I have my doubts whether we have some designs on, trying to project power in the South China Sea. I don't think it's all of that. I think it's simply the fact that because we have this broad plan to convert this into a sort of commercial entity, we need to go out there and defend it. But my last point actually is going to be this, that if we are talking about the defense of the Andamans, and the Major General here had mentioned defense of the Andaman, I think 2 or 3 things are significant. One, of course, you need these air bases, but you also need what is now called in naval parlance an A280 complex. And anti-access area denial complex, and in that you've got to have things like sensors, seabed sensors.
Okay.
You've got to have things like land-based missiles that can take care of any attack that would happen on your islands. I mentioned these things because the Chinese, in the way they are developing their islands, and the Indonesians, in the way they are developing the Natuna Islands, are precisely developing all of these capabilities around their islands.
Okay.
So just having airfields, I don't think is enough. That will give you surveillance, but to physically defend those islands against any ingress or against any attack by an adversary, we need to have all of these assets in place. That's what is needed.
Okay, we're running short of time, but a quick comment, concluding comment from you, General Arora, on what needs to be done as far as future is concerned.
Right. Militarily, what needs to be done has been covered. I totally agree with Admiral Sinha. I think the stress should be on economic development. Right now, the islands are dependent on everything from the mainland. There is tremendous potential of fisheries, the seabed mining, oil and gas, tourism, you name it. Nothing has been exploited so far.
Okay.
There is need to develop along with technology. Now, technology can bring in such stuff as making it independent of, right now electricity is by generators. So technology can produce electricity from the sea, desalination of water. If desalination of water is done on a big scale, which is becoming much cheaper, the uninhabited islands.
So basically making it independent.
So I think if economic development takes place, naturally the importance will increase, private investment will increase, tourism will increase, and it will become so much more easier to generate funds to make Andaman and Nicobar more defensible.
Okay, so clearly, as our panelists have pointed out, that Andaman and Nicobar Islands are not only strategically located, but strategically significant for India. And apart from having a tri-services command there, the development of these islands will have to take place hand in hand, both in terms of civil development as well as military development, infrastructure development. We'll come back again next week with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.